Maiga van and Melonine, and well met indeed. I am Arachir Galadurthan, head of the modding team behind Divide and Conquer, and welcome to another modding tutorial video, this time detailing exactly how buildings are set up and all of the little information that you'll need to edit and modify any buildings within the game. So as there won't be any other introduction this time, so we're going to go to the same location that we were before, and this time there are three main files that you will want to open. So in your Divide and Conquer and then data folder, or wherever you are, but in the then data folder, the first one you're going to want is export descript buildings, which is just there. You don't need to bother with the enums one, it doesn't mean anything anymore, but the export descript buildings, you will need that open. Then go into the text folder and open the export buildings, that one just there, and then go back into then world, maps, base, and open descript regions, that one just there. So as before, here's one I've prepared earlier. This is the EDB, which is what we always call it, and all buildings within the game that can be built are listed here. And all of the information is primarily from this file. The export buildings details all of their names and descriptions, and we'll discuss that in a moment. And then lastly, the descript regions is only used for the hidden resource system, which we shall get into in just a moment. The aim of this video is just to give you an overview of what the file looks like, what each line sort of dictates, and what the purpose of every entry is. I'm not going to teach you in this episode how to make any changes, just what can be changed. These are just the two foundation videos, this and the unit stats one I did before, that will allow you to then make the edits and changes as we move through and I do various other modding tutorials. So, a building entry always begins with the line building. So if you were to search the file for building, that gives you the starting entry point for almost all of them, although do note building is used elsewhere. But building equestrian, building sea equestrian, that is the name of the building tree, which is what it is called. So this is a building tree and it contains all of the upgrade levels, and it always ends after that plugin and then those two and then finally third brackets. So a building tree can have up to 9 entries within it. So a building could theoretically be upgraded 8 times before you've then reached the hard-coded limit of how many tiers. The next line down, the levels, dictates what tier is which. So this building, the Mason's Lodge, which we use just to make all other buildings cheaper, it has quite a few tiers. As you can see, there is Lodge, then Master Lodge, Grand Lodge, North Lodge, and South Lodge. And I've also used this tree to show you how branching trees work, as we'll get onto in a moment. So the first line that you're going to want to then, or the next line, then dictates who is allowed to build this specific tier. Building restrictions are governed at the individual tier level and not at the overall tree level. So a nation could, for example, build the first and second tier, but then not be able to build the third. And this is fairly common in Divide and Conquer with the Mesoamerican factions, or you may know them as the Wild Men factions, but in the files they're Mesoamerican. So they can get the first and second and third tier of the blacksmith, for example, but then they can't get anything beyond that. If we go to the blacksmith, sorry, the fastest way to get there is to lock the word. Oh, I think it might be smiths actually. I should have put a marker on it. There we are. So the blacksmith. So this is a better one to show you in terms of the restrictions because it's got a lot of the factions listed. So this first tier dictates what restrictions apply to who can build this building and under what circumstances. So this is the leather tanner, which is the first tier of the smith building. And it lists all of the factions there that can train it. Now, the options in this section that I've highlighted in red, you can either list the individual factions, so Sicily, Milan, Scotland, etc., or you can list culture type. So you could write Northern European, Eastern European, Southern European, and that would allow it for every culture or every nation that uses that specific culture. The third and final option, which we've already seen, I'll put a marker there, the third option that we've already seen is all. And all just means everyone can build it. There has to be something written in there or it never works. And again, as with the unit stats attributes line, the format is always a space after the bracket, then an entry, and then a comma, and then another space, and then the next entry. And they're always separated by commas, as you've seen with this entry. So Sicily, comma, space, Milan. if you don't follow that specific format, it will crash your game. This is why modding is more about attention to detail than it is really any knowledge, because you may know exactly how to do things, but make one tiny little error somewhere and everything is kaput. So that is the requirement of how you set it up. Now the stables isn't the best indicator, but we go up to the castle, I can just show you the other one. As I say, the other option is to split them up by culture. So in Divide and Conquer, we have Southern European, Greek, Eastern, Middle Eastern, Meso, Northern, Gondor, and they are all present there. And it allows you to dictate who gets to build it. Then lastly, you also put in any requirements thereafter. So in this one, it shows you that the Leather Tanner requires these factions, and it requires that a building is present, and the minimum level of that building is Hinterland Farms Farms. So the building present min level is the requirement, as in there must be this specific building present. The next entry, Hinterland Farms, is the building tree name. So if it were blacksmith, for example, it would be Smith. And then Farms is the tier within that. So in this case, we'd have Smith, then Leather Tanner. Here we've got Hinterland Farms and Farms. But we can jump to Hinterland Farms. And you can see that Farms is the first level. And then there's Farms +1, Farms +2, Farms +3. So the first level of the blacksmith requires that you've built the first tier of the Hinterland Farms building. Now, whilst we're just on this is a perfect segue to talk about what hinterland means, and it's bizarre in truth, but by adding the word hinterland before any building entry, you automatically make that building undestroyable. That's not really the word, is it? Immune to destruction, that's probably a better word. So any building that has hinterland at the start cannot be destroyed on the campaign map in any way. It will always be present once it has been built. It's very useful for key buildings, of course, like iconic buildings like the White Tower of Ecthelion or the Black Gate. But hinterland is how you stop buildings from being destroyed. You don't need to add any other feature. You simply need to add the word hinterland and then underscore to the start of the building tree name, and then that building cannot be destroyed. You'll note that the individual tiers within the tree do not need to be called hinterland whatever, only the building does, and that will stop that building being destroyed. So that's one of the ways that you can restrict a building, is there another building present? Another way that you can restrict a building is through the hidden resource system, which is seen primarily on units, but it also works for buildings. So I can show you here at the Lorien Lancer tier. I could very well have the hidden resource Vale, for example. If I copy and paste that up there, then it gives an example. So by adding that entry, we're restricting the building to locations in the world where the hidden resource Vale is listed. Now, the hidden resource system is very, very straightforward. There are 64 possible hidden resources that you are allowed to use, and you can assign them to any region in the game that you want, and then the game will look for those hidden resources, and if it finds them, it will allow you to build this building there. It's very, very simple, and it applies primarily, as I say, to the units more than the buildings, but it can work with units. And this is where the Descript Regions file comes in. So if you scroll to the very top of your file, this is where the hidden resources are all listed. There are 64 available through the hard-coded system, so any more than 64, and I don't think the game crashes, but the number 65 and beyond, they simply won't be recognised, and any building that requires them will just never be able to be built. So we keep a little running tally so that we know where we are, because as you can see, it's very difficult to actually count them because they are just listed in any sort of order. So you'll note that some of them are region-based, and then we use a system that allows us to cross-reference different hidden resources, and so pinpoint certain settlements without having to waste a slot. So for example, if a region is in Angmar, it'll then have one of the hidden resources Res A through Res M, and that allows you to pinpoint that specific region. So there'll only be one region in the whole world that has the unique combination of Angmar and Res A, which allows you to use that region without wasting a specific resource. The hidden resources can just be listed there. There's no commas, you'll see. You just add a new entry after the last one. They don't have to be in any kind of order, although I try and keep them in alphabetical order once we break after the region specific ones, but you don't have to do that. And then in the Descript Region file, which as I say is found in World's Map Base, from the data folder. Every single region in the game is broken down here, and we will discuss this file in a little more detail in a further video about faction starting conditions. But for the moment, for buildings, all you need to use is this line here. Every single region, you'll note the regions are denoted by, they're the only ones that actually reach the edge of the file. This has a very strict format where there's a few line breaks before anything that isn't a region name. And every region also ends with the word province. So every single region has _province after it. So that's how you know where the new entries start. You'll note that the entries are very, very small. There's only about 8 or so lines. But this one lists all of their hidden resources. So if we take the Borderlands province, oh no, that's not a very recognisable one. Shire North. Shire North province is fortunately where you actually think it would be, which is in the north of the Shire. You'll note that it is given a grassland hidden resource, no brigands, which means that brigands cannot spawn here, or rebels can't spawn there. It's a region that you're allowed to train boats in. Pirates can't spawn there either, which stops any sort of inland sea rebels. On places like Lake Evandene, for example, on the world map of Middle-earth, it's an incredibly small lake, and you don't want anyone building ships there. But more importantly, you don't want rebel fleets arriving in there, because they're not going to go anywhere. They're just going to sit there, and it's annoying. So by denoting no pirates, then no pirates will spawn on the borders of that region if it borders any kind of water. And next up, we note that this region is in Arthedain. We've given it the Arthedain hidden resource, and it uses Res K. And if you want to add a hidden resource, you simply, again, add a comma, add a space, add a new resource at the end. It's very, very straightforward. You can add your own resources by just adding them to this line and then applying them in the region that you want them in. And then you can use them to restrict a building if you want, like the wooden palisade here has hidden resource unlocked. The unlocked hidden resource is present in almost every single region because it is required for those regions to upgrade. So Shire North is actually a very good example because it's one of the few that doesn't have it, which means you can't upgrade that province. That's the basis. So if you are trying to build a wooden palisade, which takes a village up to a town, the game first of all is checking, does the region have the hidden resource unlocked? The Shire North does not have that hidden resource, so you can't upgrade. That's how they work. Very straightforward. Right, so that's the requirements of the city, or of the building, sorry. Let's go back to the smith. This is quite a useful one. Next up, we come to the capabilities. So the entry always begins with the capabilities. Now, a side note here is that in Medieval 2, you are able to convert towns into castles. Now, many mods don't allow you to do this, and they take the feature away, and Divide and Conquer is one, but in the interest of teaching you everything that you could possibly know, there is a way that you can set it up so that buildings also can swap. So there are two key features that you have to add to each individual building tree in order to allow conversion to work. The first is that you must designate what the building would convert to, and then secondly, you must say which tree this one relates to, or whether it's city or castle. So using the Mesoamerican barracks as an example, you will see underneath the building tree, the first line is then convert to castle meso barracks. Now, castle meso barracks is another building tree. So if we scroll down, it will be after this one. So there's the building castle meso barracks. So that is what it is going to convert to. It's going to convert to this tree. So you need to assign where it's going to convert first of all. And then secondly, what you then need to do is within each individual tree, you must tell it whether or not this is the city version or the castle version. So you'll note here the meso barracks muster ground, it requires a city. And then the muster ground ancillary, the next tier does, as does the third tier, and then finally as does the fourth. However, when we get to the building that we converted to, obviously the previous one was city, so this one must be castle. There is no requirement that the building be called castle whatever. That is purely pragmatic because then you can see this is the castle version and the other one is therefore the city version. The only thing that actually dictates whether it's castle or city is that word there after the name of the tier of the building within the tree. So that's how conversion works. You can, as has been shown with other buildings, you can completely delete the conversion line and it makes absolutely no difference. And also that convert to 0, which is listed there, is also a holdover that is not required in any way because that allows each individual tier to convert to a different tier of the other buildings. So that is just a holdover that doesn't mean anything. But where that says convert to 0, if there were a castle version of this building, then this specific tier would convert to tier 0 of the other building line as well. But you could have it so that if in a city I built a leather tanner, and then I converted that city to a castle through the game's inbuilt conversion system, then I could list that conversion to be 3. So, for example, in a city, it is only the first tier of the blacksmith building. But when the process of converting to a castle upgrades it to, say, the 4th or 5th tier, for example, you can do that, and that you just have to add the convert to, and then you add the number there. So this obviously is number 0, and then the next one is number 1, and then 2 and 3, and so on. So then we come to the actual capabilities. Now there's many different things that a building can do, but the most useful thing and the most important thing to show you is unit training. But we'll deal with that last. So first of all, there's various features. One of the key things that a building will do would just give you a flat income bonus. And that is what is listed here in the blacksmith. So income bonus, then the word bonus, and then you type how much it is. So the leather tanner gives you 40 gold coins. That is a value that is unaffected by trade or anything at all. It is just a flat 40 gold coin bonus. You will the building card within the game will list the bonus, and it will just say 40. It is affected by nothing. You can also have trade, obviously, you can have trade bonuses as well. And if we jump to the market, or any kind of market, you can see the trade bonus. So the trade base income bonus and then bonus. You always have to have the secondary bonus word, and then that can be anything you want really, but generally you'd keep it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, something like that, and that will give a flat percentage income bonus to the trade, and every increment of 1 is plus 5%. So a number 1 there means it gives a 5% boost to trade, a number 2 means 10%, 15, 20, etc. So that's the trade income bonus. Something else that I've shown you already as we are using the Mason's Lodge is allowing buildings to be reduced in cost. Every building is either wooden or stone, as you can see down here. It lists the material, and we will get onto that into just a moment. But then you can then decide whether or not there's a cost reduction for those tiers. So construction cost bonus stone, and then the bonus is 15, which means that that building makes all stone buildings 15% cheaper. And then underneath is the wooden equivalent. So you can, if you play around with that a little more, you can have it say, for example, that all dwarven buildings are stone, and the dwarven Mason's Lodge building reduces stone cost. But then, say, for example, Mesoamerican buildings might all be wooden. Or there might be the odd dwarven building which is wooden that you've done on purpose, so that that building is never cheaper. And that's something that you can do, but I'm not really sure why you would. Now, the only thing to note, though, is that these two entries, annoyingly, don't actually put anything on the building card. So even though this building gives a 15% reduction on stone or wood, the building's actual card, the UI for the building, wouldn't say that. And for some bizarre reason, taxable income bonus of, again, 15, the only thing that line actually does is put in a line on the building that says reduces the cost of other buildings by 15% in this instance. Which is very, very strange and a bit odd, but there we are. That is how it works. And we have a similar feature for the next tier. So the next tier is construction time bonus. Now, this allows you to set, as it says there, other defensive and religious buildings, but there's no way of setting whether a building is religious, other, or defensive, or otherwise. So you just need to put all three in to make sure they're all covered. And that gives a 20% reduction in building time. But again, similarly with the cost reduction, there's no text identifier added to the game by using these bonuses. So you have to add the population loyalty bonus, and then this one works in 5% increments as well, whereas this one is a flat, it's just 15 equals 15%. But here, it's 4 times 5 is how much the percentage is. So this one obviously gives a 20%. I'm not really sure why it works like that, but that is how it does. And then lastly, as I said, there are other things that you can include in the capability tier, and I will put a link in the description again to a very useful Total War Center thread that lists all of them. But the main one that you would most likely be here for, of course, is unit editing as well. So we come back to the barracks because now you can see how to recruit units. So recruit pool is the first word that you'll need, and then you need to list, as we said before, the type name of the unit from the EDU from the previous video, the unit stats video. So and it's always surrounded by by those brackets. I don't think you actually... They're not brackets, are they? What are they? Speech marks. You don't actually need them, I don't think, if the unit only has one word as a name. But we always put them in. It's safety first, always put them in. Because we know that they work this way. There's no point trying to see if they work the other way, because there's hardly any units that only have one name anyway. But, so then you list the unit's name. Now, there are 4 numbers that follow. The first number says how many of those units will be available once the building is built. So as soon as I build this building, I've got 1 unit of Dunlending Warband ready to train. The next number dictates the replenishment. And to work out what it will actually be in practice, you need to divide the number 1 by whatever number is there. So I can't divide 1 by 13 in my head because I'm not that good. But there you are. 1 divided by 13 is 0.07 rounded up to 8. 0.078. Oh, no, hang on. I've divided it by 13. Ugh, idiot. Sorry. 1 divided by 0.13. There we are. Is 7.69. Better. So it takes roughly between 7 and 8 turns for the Dunlending Warbands to replenish. Very, very common numbers, of course, are 0.1, which is 10 turns. 0.5 is also quite common, which of course is only 2 turns. 0.05, which is 20 turns. Those are fairly common numbers. It can be whatever you want. You can also have it as 1 if you want it to, which means the unit is available every single turn. Now the next number it limits that. So the next number says how many units will be available maximum if you don't train any ever. So if I never train any Dunlending Warband, what will be the maximum pool I get? And you can see here it's only 2. So I can never have more than 2 available Dunlending Warband units. Then you can dictate whether they start with any type of experience bonus. And it can be anything from 1 to 9. There is, unfortunately, a lot of evidence to suggest it doesn't work, and you have to then retrain the unit anyway, but that is one of the better ways to try and give a unit an experience bonus. Then, of course, it lists what factions is it required for, because many factions share barracks, and this is shown exactly with this barracks. So you'll see that the muster ground requires Aztecs, Teutonic Order, Timurids, and Khand, which is Dunland, Enedwaith, Anduin, and Khand. But of course, we only want this unit to be available for the Aztecs, so we pop in the requires faction Aztecs. You don't have to put that in, and then the unit would be available to anyone that can build the barracks. Which is very, very rare, of course. But it is something you can do. You can completely omit that line, and then the Dunlending Warband would be available to all 4 of them, provided the Wildman culture is 25. So that's what the final stage does, is it's religion. But of course, in Divide and Conquer, in game, religion is called culture. But in truth, this is the religion of the region. And it just dictates what level of religion do you need. So here we need at least 25% Wildmen religion in order to train this unit. Do note that if your region does not have 25% culture, or whatever you put there, then the 1 unit available at the start will not be available. And it will not be available once you do reach the culture. So that 1 requires that you've already attained the required culture or religion level before you build the building. If you build the building before you get to 25, you will never have a Dunlending Warband unit available straight away, and you'll have to wait the 7 to 8 turns for them to train. And that is really it. So again, though, units can be restricted by hidden resources, and there's an example down there where the Veiled Defenders are only available in mountain regions. Units can also, you could make that unit require that a certain building has been built by using the same and building present min level feature that we use for the buildings. So you could restrict certain units. You could say that that unit's only available, for example, once you've got the 2nd tier of blacksmith, all available on the units. Law bonus is another bonus that you can apply. There are 3 main bonuses that affect order in a city. Or 2, sorry, law and happiness. So the law bonus 1 is a 5% bonus to law. But if we look for happiness, then you can increase or decrease the happiness with certain buildings as well. So here we have a happiness bonus of -6, which is actually a minus 30% in game. But do remember that if you ever do a minus on happiness or law, it won't ever go below 0. So it will just take 30 points of happiness, because it's 30 points, not 30%, sorry. It will take 30 points of happiness off of whatever the happiness already is. So if the happiness in the settlement was 25, it will just go to 0. Yeah, that's how it works with negatives. But the happiness bonus is the other one that affects the general order of the city. So you can make certain buildings totally negate any form of disorder by giving them very high law or happiness bonuses. Then we come down finally to what is required to actually build the building. Well, certain requirements on what is building the building and certain characteristics of the building is probably better. So the first material, as I say, that can be wooden or stone, and it's affected by the reductions of construction cost bonus stone or wooden. The construction and then the number means how many turns does it take to build. Very straightforward, so that takes 2 turns. The next, of course, is cost. It's 950 coins. And settlement min means that the village means that the settlement level must be at that level in order to build it. So village, town, large town, city, large city, and huge city. Now, an odd quirk of the system is that castles and cities use the same settlement min level, which is very, very annoying. So the barracks is a good example of this. So the first tier of the muster ground in a city, because we've got the word city there, requires the minimum of a town. But if we jump to the castle meso barracks, you'll note that the first tier of the castle version requires a village. But what that actually means is the lowest tier of the castle line. So what that means really in practice is a motte and bailey. So a castle, you'll always see village, town, and then normally large town, which is a motte and bailey, a castle, and a stronghold. Or a motte and bailey in the base game, I think it's a wooden castle, and then a castle, and then a fortress, and then citadel. So there are 5 tiers of castle, and there are 6 or 7 of city. But they use the same designator, and it's very, very annoying, and it's something you just have to get your head round. And lastly, then we come to the upgrades, and this then pushes it on to the next tier. Excuse me, sorry. So here under the levels, we listed each individual level. So Lodge, Master Lodge, Grand Lodge, North Lodge, South Lodge. And under the upgrades, we say what building are we going to next, what tier is next. So for this building, the Lodge, the next one is the Master Lodge, as it should be. And if there's any irregularities, so if it's Lodge and then you put an upgrade here which is lower than that one, the game simply won't start. But you can jump over the next level if you want, but I mean there's no point. That makes absolutely no sense, because you might as well just not have that extra tier. But it doesn't have to be. The Lodge could jump up to the Grand Lodge, but then you've wasted time in putting the middle one in. But so that sets the next upgrade, and then we go into the next entry, which is again denoted from there. You note the name, and it's all the same again. The only other thing to talk about is branching trees. Branching trees allows you to have one of a number of upgrades, but only one of them can be chosen. So it gives you an option. This is useful, for example, if you want to set a barracks system that says once you've got to the second tier of your barracks, are you then going to choose, for example, Aethode or Anduin Wildmen? Like, are you going to specialize the city in one of those barracks types? Is an example. And you can have as many tiers as are remaining for the upgrade option. So remember, there can only be 9 tiers in any one tree, but you could have 1 tier with then 8 possible upgrade options if you wanted. That's crazy, but of course you can have it if you want to give them 8 different buildings to choose from. But as I say, just remember, the building they build, they then can't build the other one. So here in the third tier of the Lodge, it then allows you to upgrade to either the North or the South Lodge. And then you simply then after that, you just list them as if they were normal buildings. With the one caveat being they don't have an upgrade, because this is the end of the tree. If you want it to be, but there could be an upgrade. So once you've chosen your branch, which is at this point, you could then break the upgrade up and go further on. So you could then... I've chosen the North Lodge, but then I could get North Lodge Plus and then North Lodge Plus Plus. You could upgrade as many times as long as you don't go above the 9 tiers that each tree allows. But as I say, you only choose one of these and the other one becomes unavailable. You can then have different requirements for these particular buildings, which is exactly what we have here with the North and South Lodge. So the North Lodge requires the hidden resource Arthedain and resource E, which means it's only available up in Numinas or Fornost, one of the two. And the South Lodge is only available in Osgiliath, and we split them up that way. You'll also note that even though the upgrade tiers, there's the building that the upgrade tiers come from is allowed for all factions, the actual upgrades are restricted to either Turks, Sicily, Denmark or Russia. So it doesn't matter if the faction requirements do not have to tally up with the previous faction requirements. You don't need to do that. But just note that every tree ends with that setup, with plugins and then the double brackets and the final bracket. I've never seen any actual plugins, even in the base game. I'm not sure what it is for, but we all just know it as the way that ends. So that's how branching trees end, and that is everything about buildings except for the names. So in order to change the name of a building, it is the levels that you are interested in. So if we take Grand Lodge, because that's a nice easy identifier, and jump over to the export buildings, then it lists the Grand Lodge. Now the first entry, you always just replicate the name. You don't have to give a name there. It doesn't matter. You'll note there's a couple of tiers where you do not translate, and then you can name the building depending on various factors, and they are either by culture or by faction. So with this building, for example, the Grand Lodge, for the Northern European it would be called a Mason's Guild House, and then there is their description there listing out, and then finally there is their short description after that. Then we've got the Mesoamerican name, the Middle Eastern name, the Eastern European name, Greek name, Southern European and Gondor name. But at the very bottom, you'll note that it has a unique name for when the Turks build it. So whenever they build it, and granted it's still just called a Mason's Guild House, but it does allow you to then have a building that every nation can build, but that has a different name for every single nation. And you can go as in-depth with that as you wish. So you could have, you can break it down by all available factions, which I think is 31 or something. You could list them all and give them all a different name. A very good example of that is if we go to the Warriors Guild. So here we are at the second tier of what was the old Swordsmith Guild, but in game we call it the Warriors Guild. And you'll note that many different factions have many different names. So if the Mesoamericans have all been grouped together, and for them it's just simply called a Royal Swordmasters Guild. But Byzantium have their own name, Scotland, Milan, and it's just an example of how you can give everything its own name and its own description. Now those are the names of the individual levels within the tree, but the actual name of the tree you can also change, and they're all listed at the bottom of the file. So at the very bottom is where we get the name for the actual building. So Mason's Lodge, for example, will be listed down here, and it will say Mason's Lodge name, and it's simply called Master Builders. So when you open the game and you right click on the building browser and it lists all of the available buildings within that city, these are the names it's using. So that's the name of the tree overall. So barracks, for example, are just simply called, normally, like there we have the Teleri Barracks, which I've just seen and then I've missed it. There we are. So the Teleri Barracks tree name is simply called Teleri Barracks. And if we jump back to the this building, we'll note that we've got a Teleri Barracks and a Teleri Barracks upgrade. And in those individual levels are called the Teleri Royal Barracks and the Teleri Barracks. So there's different names for each. So you have a name for the tree and then names individually for the levels. And you can make them as whatever you want. And again, the same text rules apply, that it has to be the /n if you want to do a full paragraph break. And you can just use one of those systems if you want to have a line break. So that's everything you'd need to know about how the buildings are all set up and how they work. I will do a bespoke video on how to create a new building, I'm sure, in the future, which will go obviously into more detail about what you'd need to do. But that's just a good foundation point for how the building system works and what we do to make certain things work in the game. I will, as I say, continue this series, and the next one, just rounding out the foundation aspect, will be about faction starting criteria and conditions, so that you can change things about your factions if you want, like different bodyguard units for certain starting generals, and indeed different like religion levels within towns, this amount of money factions make. We'll do that in the next video. So I do hope this has been useful. Please post any comments or questions you have down below, and until we speak again, dear friends, Navaar Naden Paramad Melonin, and farewell.